Hello everybody, and welcome to the GKaiser Age. This is Captain Lucian GKaiser, Skull 1, and today we are going to be moving on to part 3 of the Super Dimensional Fortress Macross lore video series. So, let's get started. Skull 1, launching!
マクロの空を貫いて地球を撃った雷は我ら幼い人類に目覚めてくれと放たれた。マクロスマクロス惜しくたった若者は愛する人をかばいつつ。
So, now, we pick up where we left off with the SDF-1 Macross now stuck in orbit near Pluto. And even worse, Macross Island has been dragged with it, leaving the civilians stuck in shelters that can only survive the exposure of deep space for a short time. While Captain Global and the bridge crew are engaged in rescue operations, Hikaru and Minmay are stranded in some random section of the massive ship, having trashed there previously. Episode 4 and 5 of Macross are a little light on actual plot development. Most of these episodes are set up for the Macross setting for returning to the Earth, and of course, the paths that Hikaru and Minmay decide to take for themselves. So I'll be getting into some more details about the Macross and several other things in this video. Captain Global and First Lieutenant Misa Hayase are scrambling along with the bridge crew to coordinate the repair and rescue crews. Then, suddenly, Misa lets out a gasp as the aircraft carrier and an assault landing carrier that were docked at Macross Island float into view beyond the bridge. The crew has been trying to raise communications with them, but Captain Global points out that they were not designed to operate in space, indicating subtly the fate of the crews on those ships after the space fold. Mere moments after that, he makes the tough decision of ordering the two carriers to be docked to the Macross, and Misa is surprised that he does not want to wait to get the ARMD-1 and AMRD-2 carriers attached, but those ships were left behind in Earth's orbit, too damaged to fight. Let's take a moment to talk about those aircraft carriers named the Prometheus and the Daedalus that are being attached to the Macross to help support it. The CVS-101 Prometheus is an ocean-going fleet carrier designed to serve as the main launching craft for the VF-1 Valkyries until the Macross was activated, after which the squadrons will be assigned from the Prometheus to transfer to the Macross. The ship was designed to be semi-submersible, meaning it could submerge underwater and act like a submarine, but because it was designed primarily as a carrier first, its underwater operations were very limited and only meant to be used to prevent it from being detected by enemies in high orbit if aliens did attack the Earth. Sadly, this feature would not save the crew of the ship, as they were not configured in diving mode but operating in open air carrier operations when the fold system was activated. The Prometheus is 512 meters long, making it longer by almost 200 meters than the current Gerald R. Ford class American aircraft carrier, and it could carry an estimated 150 Valkyrie fighter craft and destroids. The ship is armed with super long-range anti-aircraft missile systems, RIM-116 RAM Mark 49 anti-aircraft close-range automatic missile systems, and 20mm Vulcan Phalanx close-in weapon systems as well. Now, moving on to the other ship, the SLV-111 Daedalus was built as a semi-submersible assault landing carrier for deploying large amounts of destroyed squadrons directly into combat. The ship's main feature was a large ramp that extends from the bow of the ship outward, designed for loading and sorting destroyeds and other combat vehicles. While the Daedalus comes with no shipboard weapons, the destroyeds can be deployed on its top deck. And, of course, with the front ramp being partially extended, they can use their weapons tied with the ship's radar array to counter enemy attacks. The ship is really meant to be escorted to its deployment zone and deploy its forces after enemy defenses along the shore have been dispelled. Later in the series, though, we'll get to see the Daedalus used to great effect. But for right now, let's check up on Hikaru and Minmay. Hikaru, a young civilian pilot, and Lin Minmay, the young girl he rescued, are lost within the Macross after crashing inside of it during a battle, and even after trying to use Hikaru's compass to try and navigate through it, they still find themselves unable to make any headway. The communicator on his racer is damaged beyond repair, and they only have the limited emergency rations on his plane to survive with. In the meanwhile, in space, Major Fokker is on patrol outside of the Macross as the carriers are being moved into place to attach to the Macross directly, and he asks for permission to search for Hikaru, his missing friend. Captain Global takes over the conversation and sternly states to Fokker that 50,000 civilians are being brought aboard the ship and they are currently the biggest priority. And Roy barks a yes sir, replying that of course their lives are more important than his friend, and then cutting the comm line. After spending some time exploring the ship's interior for a few hours, Minmay and Hikaru find themselves at the foot of a massive airlock door, which is easily the size of the Zentrani soldier that they ran across back on the island. While trying to figure out what to do next, they find themselves looking out an observation window into deep space, seeing debris from the island floating around out there, and this just marks the beginning of their small adventure together. In the meantime, the bridge crew of the Macross are trying to figure out what to do about contacting Earth as they finish loading up the 50,000 civilian refugees, but they worry that sending out radio waves that could reach the Earth in the long run might actually reveal their exact position to the enemy. Now, I'm going to be honest, most of this part of Macross was mostly Minmay and Hikaru discussing their backgrounds and what they dream about doing in the future. And it is here that Hikaru discovers Minmay has a very lovely singing voice. And at one point, Hikaru even rigs his flight suit and helmet to be airtight after they see a large tuna floating by the observation window near that airlock. He goes out the airlock and grabs it, but in the end, the tuna traps him in the airlock as he's waiting for the pressurized door to cycle and open. The door opens and he barely manages to pull himself and part of the tuna in, but the only part he manages to get is the head as the door slices off the rest and it floats back out into space. Even worse, his suit is now ripped from the process of him struggling with the tuna, and he can no longer use it to retrieve anything else or even try and do a quick spacewalk to possibly another airlock or somewhere else on the ship to get help. After several more days, the two survivors find their luck running out as the food, even what little they managed to get from the tuna head that they stretched out thanks to Minmay's great cooking ability, turning it into a soup, is almost gone. They have been able to find no way out of the winding, endless corridors, and I know what you might be thinking now. How is it possible that no one has found them yet on the Macross? But you have to remember, the ship is over 1,210 meters long in length, and most of the ship is just engineering and systems that run it. Most of those are even automated and able to effect limited self-repairs, since the ship was originally meant to be helmed by the massive Zentrani soldiers. It would be like bugs being put into the back of a semi-trailer loaded with supplies and trying to find their way all the way to the cab where the driver is. After 12 days, Minmay starts to have a bit of a breakdown, and even Hikaru, who's been supporting her with his steadfast attitude, is starting to think that they may not make it out alive. Minmay exclaims that she is sad at not ever having had the chance to be a bride, and looking at the teary-eyed Minmay, Hikaru pulls off his scarf and drapes it over her head like a bridal headdress. He offers a pretend wedding to her, and she smiles, embracing Hikaru. But even that gesture is not enough, and at one point, she even says it might be better for them to just end it by walking out of the airlock together. But looking at the crying Minmay, Hikaru shores up his courage, vows that they will get out of there alive, and embraces Minmay close, and the two of them find themselves looking into each other's eyes. Just as they lean close, their trembling lips about to touch, there's a loud rending of metal, and a massive dud enemy missile crashes through the ceiling, just missing the pair of them. A flood of light fills the area that they've been living in, and when they look up, they see the people from Macross City staring down at them through the hole, and Minmay instantly brightens up as she recognizes the mayor of Macross City among them. The citizens of the city haul them up, and the pair are surprised to see that a recreation of Macross City has been built using the highly advanced technology within the ship, including Minmay's aunt's restaurant. They were able to rebuild it so fast by salvaging as much of the city as possible that they could from Macross Island and transplanting it within the ship to give the civilians a place to live, since they don't know how long it might take them to get back to Earth if the fold system is not able to be recovered. While Minmay's uncle thanks Hikaru for taking good care of his niece, Misa makes a ship-wide broadcast that their Valkyrie squadrons have destroyed the enemy that recently attacked them, which is where the dud missile came from in its source. The mayor pats Hikaru's back, but the exhausted and malnourished Hikaru falls over, tired, and is caught by the crowd around him that helped to carry him to get aid. Hikaru is understandably hungry and stunned at the appearance of a new Macross City within the massive ship's interior, and wonders what will happen now. Several more days have passed, and the citizens of Macross City have been slowly getting themselves used to living within the massive ship. But their anxiety over the next alien attack looms over everything. Now, at this point, Hikaru and Minmay are living in the Nan Nan Chinese restaurant, and Hikaru is unsure of what to do with himself as he's only ever known being a stunt plane pilot, while Minmay is happy working at the restaurant and helping keep everything in order. Minmay convinces her aunt and uncle to fully open the restaurant again, using their limited rations to make meals that people can enjoy, and the first patrons are actually soldiers from the armed forces. Hikaru, still unable to figure out what to do with himself, overhears Minmay telling the soldiers that Hikaru is just a friend after they tease her about being stuck and lost with Hikaru for so long in the ship. You have to kind of feel bad for Hikaru, as it seems Minmay has just gone back to her idealistic life, having forgotten the way that they grew so close in those several days while surviving together. Deep within the Macross itself, though, Captain Global has gone to the engine room to ask the chief engineer the status of the ship's main gun weapon. And the chief explains that because the fold system disappeared, the main gun can no longer be fired. The main reactor and the energy converter for the main gun were initially connected through the fold system via energy conduits, and its disappearance has left a void between them with no way to repair or replace them. Now, the solution that they actually come up with is pretty unique. They decide to replace it with similar conduits found throughout other places in the ship, but in order to do that, a modular transformation of the ship would have to happen. Such a drastic change in the ship's modular components could do damage to the newly built Macross City, possibly destroy it even, and this causes Global to hesitate to act on it. In the meantime, Hikaru goes out to where the remains of his racer are left and is met by his friend Roy Fokker, who teases Hikaru about what he's going to do now that his racer is a pile of scrap. Ignoring partly Hikaru's anger at his comment, Roy takes Hikaru on a walk, sensing the frustration and loss of direction in his young friend. He directs Hikaru to look out of a viewport, and they see VF-1A Valkyries being launched off of the aircraft carrier Prometheus that has been docked with the Macross. The advantage that they had with the carrier being attached was that, of course, with its semi-submersible design, it took very little reworking to make it space-worthy and airtight. It is very cool to see the VF-1 fighters being lifted to the flight deck like a normal carrier, and even space-suited deckhands signaling them for takeoff and landings. Hikaru is just as amazed to see the fighters can also fly in space, and Roy, catching that glimmer of excitement in his friend's eyes, asks him once again if he'd like to fly one. He realizes that Roy is trying to enlist him into the military, and for a moment Roy thinks that Hikaru might accept it, but instead he turns and asks Roy if a girl can change overnight. Roy, of course, being the ladies' man that he is, laughs as he then turns around and puts it in piloting terms that women can sometimes do a 180 inversion, and then asks Hikaru if he's fallen for Minmay. Hearing that hesitant laugh from his friend, Roy tells him to relax, as it was Minmay who said that he was feeling down and asked Roy to come check up on him. Being the big brother friend he is, Roy tells Hikaru that girls can be fickle, but also tells him to make sure that he doesn't lose her to another man. Moments like these really made me love the bro moments between Hikaru and Roy. Roy is possibly my favorite Valkyrie pilot, followed very closely in second by Isamu Dyson, who we'll discuss in a later Macross lore video. He is a lady chaser, but he's got a good heart and with some really amazing piloting skills, which earned him the title of Skull Leader. Back, still near lunar orbit on board Britai's battleship command deck, Isildur shows him footage of Earth taken from a recon unit as they were observing the battle, and they learn that the aliens that they are facing are what they call myclones. Now, just for this lore video, though the show does call them myclones, I'm going to use the microns or micronians because it just sounds better to me from the old English dub Robotech. But lore-wise, they are called myclones. It sounds like something that you'd probably see on like a Nintendo Wii or something. So that's why I'm just going to go with micronians. It sounds a lot cooler, and I just like the way it sounds better. So we're just going to roll with that, but always keep in mind, myclones, very strange. So let's go ahead and move on. So Isildur then retrieved some old Zentrani military records that had a very stern warning when it comes to this current situation that they find themselves in. Avoid the worlds of the myclones. Britai decides to turn his attention away from Earth itself and pursue their true prey, the battleship SDF Macross, and the Zentrani fleet executes a space fold. Hikaru finds himself back at the restaurant, having decided to talk to Minmay, and he actually encounters Minmay in the hallway before he can knock on her door. She invites him in, and Minmay tells him to open a letter, the thing that she risked her life to go back to in their house during the battle on the island. Hikaru thinks he's about to read a love letter from a boyfriend, but what he actually reads, he is surprised to find is actually a letter from the Olin record company. Minmay is excited because she's actually won the first round of the singing audition, which is her big dream. Asking Hikaru if he's ever had a dream, Minmay is worried when he replies that his dream is now a scrap heap, as his dream was becoming a world-famous racer piloting his plane. This build up their characters and their dreams really helps to set the stage for things that are going to be coming down the line in the story and for both of them. And of course, it helps to develop deeper meaning for both of their characters, which is a big thing for shows at this time because not a lot of shows were doing deep character development like Macross. There were very few, one of them being an example, which was Mobile Suit Gundam, the original Gundam series, and ones like itself. But since Mobile Suit Gundam wasn't a huge success when it first came out in Japan, Macross was taking a big risk by trying to emulate that same more gritty, realistic style instead of still doing what was popular at the time, which was giant, super robot shows. Alarms go off on the bridge of the SDF-1 Macross as they detect a default signature, and Captain Global is informed that the radar reports show a massive default signature as well as several unidentified objects that have appeared behind them and are closing in rapidly. First Lieutenant Hayase confirms that they match the hostile forces that attacked Earth, and Captain Global orders her to take them to full battle readiness. She makes an announcement over the shipboard speakers, telling everyone on the ship that there's an enemy attack with hostile units approaching fast. All Valkyrie squadrons are ordered to alert status and to scramble their units when ready. Major Fokker puts on his helmet, ready to launch in his VF-1S Valkyrie, and I have to say I love the design of his personal fighter and the skull and crossbones of Skull Squadron on it, which is based off of the real-life Jolly Roger Squadron. Roy takes off, and the rest of the variable fighter squadrons launch from the CVS-101 Prometheus as well, ready to engage the enemy. As Hikaru and Minmay go out on the town, they hear a broadcast from Misa announcing that there's an air raid alert, and Minmay asks if they'll be okay, to which Hikaru says that Roy and his team, they'll take care of the enemy because Roy is a great pilot. Minmay asks why he always talks about Roy, but never talks about himself as a pilot, and she says that Hikaru is a great pilot himself. The Zentradi units assault the Macross as Britai is informed by a subordinate that a lead Zentradi detachment has moved into direct attack range, and Exildol considers it strange that the enemy ship hasn't fired their main gun yet. At the suggestion of Exildol, Britai orders the lead detachment to hit the enemy harder and provoke a reaction, but he wants the ship only damaged, not destroyed. Now that it is back in direct combat with the enemy, let's talk about the armaments on the Macross itself, starting with the most visual ones. On the main deck are 8 over-technology style guided converging beam cannons that fire massive particle beams, opening up like the main gun on the Macross itself to create twin beams that converge into one powerful beam. These are backed up by 4 178 centimeter electromagnetic railguns that are used for medium-range anti-ship combat. The ship is also armed with several large automatic anti-ship missile launchers and several anti-fighter missile emplacements as well. The ship can also deploy Mark II monster destroids on its main decks to provide even more covering fire along with other destroids. Now these can be deployed from several different spots on the Macross itself, but mostly they like to deploy these from the data list as it is a destroid carrier. This provides the Macross with some great firepower, but against the massive Zentradi forces, a single ship like the Macross SDF-1 still struggles to survive their attacks. While the Valkyrie fighter squadrons do their best downing several enemy Regold units, some of them break through and even manage to land some heavy hits on the bridge. Seeing the damage over the ship increasing and their fighter coverage pushed to the breaking point, Captain Global has no choice and gives the order to undergo the modular transformation so they can fire the main gun. Misa broadcasts the announcement of the transformation to the city inside the ship, leaving Minmay wondering what that announcement means. Minmay says that Roy must be fighting hard against the enemy, and Hikaru thinks that Minmay is just asking him to join the military as a pilot. Minmay says she didn't mean that entirely, but knowing that flying planes is Hikaru's dream, joining the armed forces as a pilot might not be a bad idea. Hikaru says being in the military means he might not get to see much of Minmay at all, but she simply states that they are stuck on the same ship. She also states that they can always see each other in their off time because the soldiers mainly go to the restaurant anyway when they're off duty. The Macross bridge crew initiates the modular transformation process, and as it begins, the ground beneath Hikaru and Minmay begins to split apart. Minmay nearly falls down into the deep crevice that opened up beneath them, and Hikaru manages to pull her up at the last second. Buildings are damaged, cars are crushed and tossed around, and things are being pulled out into space when modular sections temporarily slide open, exposing the city to space briefly. Roy is still heavily engaged with the enemy, but he can see the Macross transforming before his eyes and is amazed. I absolutely love this scene as we get to see the parts of the Macross shift and change, sliding and combining together until it becomes the iconic, massive starship-sized mecha with the carriers being the arms and the main gun now deployed and ready to fire. The design of the Macross SDF-1 is easily one of my favorite anime starships I have ever watched, and I will always love seeing it in action along with the future versions that we'll be talking about in later Macross lore videos. Captain Global orders the main gun to be fired, and the weapon charges up, unleashing its powerful attack, ripping through the massive group of Zentrani vessels and Regulate units, wiping them out. Britai and Exildo are surprised and shocked at the transformation of the ship and the fact that they had waited to nearly the last moment to fire the main gun, which would normally be used for long-range engagements. So, Britai decides to keep the rest of his forces back, unable to understand the tactics of this new enemy. Misa broadcasts another message to the civilians regarding the attack and the transformation of the ship, thanking those who cooperated and giving details on what to do if their property was damaged during the transformation. After seeing the destruction to the city caused by the battle, Hikaru makes his decision to join the military forces so he can do his part in not only protecting Minmay, but also the city. His contributions to the war effort will change the very nature of future battles and, over time, the war itself. But for now, he is simply determined to join the armed forces as a Valkyrie fighter pilot. Next time on Super Dimensional Fortress Macross Lore, Hikaru joins the UN Spacey forces, and right after he passes his training, he is thrust into the first battle against the enemy in the Rings of Saturn, and once again comes face to face with an enemy soldier. Misa, meanwhile, finds herself lost to the past when the Macross enters orbit over Mars base, where someone very dear to her was stationed years ago. But in the end, the only thing that they find is a new cunning Zentrani warrior commander waiting for them. Join us next time here in the GKaiser Age for the next exciting episode of Macross Super Dimensional Fortress Lore. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, favorite, subscribe, and hit that bell icon if you want to be notified when the next part is available or any of my other videos are uploaded. Also, check out the links below for my Facebook page, Twitter, Twitch, where I like to stream Macross 30 on the PS3 and more. Again, this is Captain Lucian GKaiser, Skull One signing out until the next battle.